Beneath the ancient world ran a secret web of water tunnels. This hidden network of underground aqueducts connected three entire continents, from the heart of Rome to the sands of Persia and beyond. By the end of this story, you will understand how this forgotten system fundamentally shaped our world. We will uncover how a single engineering idea could cross deserts and mountains, and ask why such a vital network was ultimately lost to time. What does it mean for a civilization to be truly connected? This story starts with a single, desperate need, a need as old as civilization itself: water. In the stark, sun-baked highlands of ancient Persia, rain was a fleeting gift, and rivers were few and far between. Survival depended on a deep, almost magical understanding of the earth. A Neolithic farmer would have watched the way morning dew gathered in the shadows of rocks, or how a trickle of moisture could appear at the base of a mountain. He would have seen that the earth itself could be a reservoir, holding vast lakes of fresh water deep beneath the dry surface. His great insight was not just to find this water, but to convince it to travel. The solution was deceptively simple, a work of genius born from pure observation. It was called a Qanat. A Qanat was far more than a well or a ditch. It was a gently sloping tunnel carved by hand through rock and soil that began deep underground, tapping directly into the water trapped in the foothills of mountains. Using nothing but simple tools and an incredible sense of grade, these early engineers would dig a vertical shaft down to the water table. Then, they would begin the painstaking work of digging a horizontal tunnel, just sloped enough for gravity to pull the water along its length, sometimes for many miles, until it finally emerged into the open air, flowing freely into their fields and villages. This was not a frantic hauling of buckets. It was a graceful, continuous delivery of life itself. Think of it as creating an artificial spring right where you needed it most. The vertical shafts spaced regularly along the tunnel's path were not just for digging, they were also for maintenance and, crucially, for ventilation, keeping the water cool and reducing evaporation in the brutal desert heat. This was a technology perfectly adapted to its environment, a sustainable system that required no pumps, no external power, only the immutable force of gravity and human perseverance. From these humble beginnings in the Persian highlands, a blueprint was born, a revolutionary idea that water could be summoned from the deep earth and made to walk across a continent. This was the first spark, the foundational innovation that would one day grow into a network uniting the world. Yet this brilliant solution raises a profound historical puzzle. Who were the true masterminds of the Qanat? The common story credits the Persians around 1000 BCE, but the ground truth is far more complex and intriguing. Scattered clues point to possible independent discoveries, a spark of the same genius igniting in different corners of the ancient world. In the arid lands of Oman, ancient water channels whisper of a parallel innovation. In the deserts of western China, similar systems known as Karez hint at a separate, yet eerily identical, answer to the same existential problem. This was not necessarily a single invention that spread from one point, but perhaps a global awakening, a moment where humanity collectively learned to listen to the whispers of the earth. So how did this knowledge travel across such vast and formidable distances? Was it carried by merchants along the Silk Road, a precious cargo of ideas more valuable than any spice? Was it a secret passed from one community of well-diggers to another, a guild of hydrological wizards whose work literally shaped civilizations? Or was it, in fact, a technology so perfectly logical, so inherently suited to solving the problem of desert survival that multiple cultures arrived at the same elegant conclusion entirely on their own. The mystery only deepens when you consider the sheer precision of their work. These were not just simple holes in the ground. To keep water flowing for miles, the tunnel had to maintain a perfect, gentle slope. Too steep and the water would rush through, eroding the walls and vanishing. Too shallow and the flow would stagnate, leaving the tunnel blocked by silt. They achieved this miracle of engineering with tools that seem almost rudimentary to our eyes. A simple sighting pole for alignment, a basic water level to check the grade. They were essentially threading a needle through the dark earth, guided only by experience, patience, and an unwavering trust in gravity. The origins of the Qanat remain one of history's great enigmas, a testament to a lost chapter of human ingenuity where the greatest triumphs left almost no trace of their creators, only the life-giving water that still flows, a silent tribute to their skill. But the blueprint for this hidden web was about to be scaled to an almost unimaginable degree. When the Roman Empire encountered these eastern water systems, they saw more than just a clever way to find water. They saw an opportunity to build monuments of pure engineering will. The Roman approach was not subtle, it was imperial. Their genius lay in taking a simple, elegant idea and magnifying it with relentless ambition and overwhelming force. While the Persian Qanat was a quiet negotiation with the landscape, the Roman aqueduct was a declaration of dominion over it. Think of the Cloaca Maxima in Rome, which began its life as a humble stream channel. The Romans did not simply divert it, they encased it in stone, transforming it into a massive subterranean sewer and water conduit that became the literal underworld of the city, a symbol of their power to control the very elements. This was not just engineering, it was statecraft made visible. The Romans institutionalized water management with a bureaucratic obsession that feels almost modern. Men like Sextus Julius Frontinus, the water commissioner for Rome, did not just build aqueducts, he wrote detailed manuals about them, cataloging every mile of conduit and every legal statute governing its use. For Rome, water was data, a resource to be measured, taxed, and controlled with meticulous precision. Of course, we all picture the towering arcades, those majestic stone bridges striding across valleys. But the true, enduring body of the Roman system was not up in the light, it was down in the dark. Beneath the cities and the countryside snaked an extensive network of subterranean specus, the enclosed conduits that carried the water. These tunnels were the hidden arteries of the empire, and their construction came at a profound human cost. They were carved through rock and earth by countless enslaved laborers, individuals whose names and stories are almost entirely lost to history. Their silent, backbreaking work literally underwrote the glory of Rome. The Romans scaled the Qanat principle to a level the world had never seen, creating a hydrological machine that allowed their cities to swell to populations that would not be seen again in Europe for over 1,000 years. They proved that an empire could be built not just on armies and laws, but on a reliable, endless flow of fresh water. So the blueprint was now complete. One empire had perfected the art of moving mountains of water, yet this knowledge was never destined to stay within its borders. The real mystery begins with its silent journey eastward, a migration of ideas that left no official treaties or military reports in its wake. How did the principles of Roman hydrology leap across deserts and mountain ranges to influence the heart of Asia? There were no legions carrying stonecutters' manuals, no diplomatic envoys trading maps of subterranean channels. The transfer happened in the spaces between history, along the most famous network of exchange the ancient world ever knew, the Silk Road. This was not a route for silk and spice alone, but a vibrant conduit for the most precious cargo of all, knowledge. Picture a caravan stopping for the night, the firelight flickering on the faces of merchants from opposite ends of the earth. A trader from Palmyra, having seen the soaring aqueducts of the Mediterranean, might describe their wonder to a well digger from the Taklamakan desert. He would speak of water channels carried on towering arches over valleys, a concept that must have sounded like myth. In return, the Eastern traveler might speak of the Karez, the ancient underground canals of the Turpan Basin that tapped into mountain aquifers with a quiet, profound efficiency. This was a conversation that left no written record, an exchange of pure engineering insight passed from one practical mind to another around 1,000 campfires. Yet this raises a fascinating possibility. Was it truly a transfer, or was it a case of parallel genius? The Karez systems of Western China are so remarkably similar to the Persian Qanat that the question is unavoidable. Did the idea travel the entire length of the Silk Road, or did the Chinese, facing the same brutal challenge of desert survival, arrive at the exact same elegant solution entirely on their own? The evidence is tantalizingly circumstantial. The timing of the Karez's flourishing seems to coincide with the height of Silk Road traffic, suggesting a sharing of ideas. But the fundamental principle is so perfectly logical, so beautifully simple, that its independent invention is just as plausible. This is the great silent dialogue of history, a conversation conducted not with words but with water and stone. We are left with a profound truth that the deepest human needs can inspire identical answers in cultures a world apart, weaving a hidden web of shared intellect beneath the surface of our divided past. Far to the south, another great African civilization was mastering the art of water. In the kingdom of Kush, with its capital at Marebe, the story of survival was not solely written by the Nile. Here, engineers constructed their own networks of canals and reservoirs, capturing the precious, unpredictable seasonal rains that the great river could not provide. These channels fed fields and fortified a city that became a bustling center of iron production and international trade, a rival to Egypt that drew its power from a sophisticated understanding of its own unique environment. But the most startling testament to African hydrological genius lies deeper in the Sahara. In what is now Libya, the Garamantes built a powerful desert kingdom not on an oasis, but by creating one from the bones of the earth itself. They constructed fagaras, their own version of the Qanat, which were miles-long underground tunnels that tapped into ancient fossil water, reserves that had been locked deep beneath the sand for millennia. This was not simply using available water, it was mining it, drawing on a non-renewable resource with a foresight and ambition that echoes our own world today. The existence of the fagaras shatters a simple narrative. This was not a one-way flow of technology from the east to the west. It was a vast, interconnected web. The Garamantes, positioned at a crossroads of trans-Saharan trade, could have encountered the Qanat idea from either Persia to their east or from Roman influences to their north. They then adapted it with breathtaking skill to their own impossible landscape. Africa was not a passive recipient of innovation. It was a vibrant, active nexus in this global conversation of water and stone, proving that the network truly did unite continents in a shared pursuit of life. This question of independent invention versus shared knowledge finds its ultimate expression deep in the Sahara. The Garamantes did not just survive the desert, they conquered it, and the evidence of their victory lies in the staggering number of fagaras they built. Over 750 miles of these underground channels transformed their capital into a lush, populated oasis, a verdant island in a sea of sand. How did a people in such profound isolation achieve this? The mystery is not just in the scale, but in the method. They accomplished this monumental task largely without the advanced metal tools that powered Roman engineering. Their primary tools were simpler yet devastatingly effective stone hammers and wooden levers, and an immense collective human effort. The work was brutal, with teams of laborers, likely slaves and prisoners of war, digging and clearing the tunnels by hand, passing baskets of earth and rock back through the narrow, dark passages. This was engineering powered by sheer will. The source of their knowledge is the core of the enigma. Were the Fagaras a local, brilliant response to a desperate situation? The Garamantes watched the rare desert rains vanish almost instantly into the sand, and they understood that the water was not gone but stored deep below in ancient fossil aquifers. Their genius was in figuring out how to reach it. They may have developed the entire system on their own, a pure product of Saharan innovation. Yet their kingdom was not a hermit state, it was a hub for trans-Saharan trade. Caravans connected them to the Mediterranean world and to Egypt, where similar water-lifting techniques like the shadoof were in use. It is entirely possible that a mere whisper of an idea, a story about tunneling for water, traveled along these trade routes and found fertile ground in the minds of Garamantian engineers, who then perfected the concept on a scale never before seen. Their story forces us to reconsider what we mean by an isolated culture. Even in the heart of the world's most formidable desert, they may have been connected to that vast, invisible web of hydrological knowledge, proving that necessity may be the mother of invention, but communication is its father. While Rome's political power fractured, the knowledge of water did not simply vanish. It found new guardians in the East. The Byzantine Empire, with its magnificent capital at Constantinople, became a fortress of hydrological preservation. They understood that a city's true strength was not just in its walls but in its resilience. When enemies laid siege, cutting off the great aqueducts, Constantinople did not falter. Beneath the city streets lay a secret world, vast underground cisterns like the breathtaking Basilica cistern. This was not merely a tank, it was an underground palace built for water, with forests of columns holding up a ceiling that mirrored the city above, a silent, dark cathedral storing the lifeblood of an empire. This was the ultimate act of foresight, transforming water from a constant flow into a strategic reserve, a lesson in survival that Rome itself had often forgotten. But preservation was only half the story. As the flame of classical learning dimmed in Europe, it was kindled into a brilliant new fire in the Islamic world. Scholars in the great intellectual centers of Baghdad and Cordoba did something far more dynamic than just safeguarding old Roman scrolls. They questioned them, experimented, and built upon them. They penned detailed treatises on hydrodynamics, studying the flow of water with a mathematical precision that was entirely new, and they fused this advanced science with the ancient, earthy wisdom of the Qanat. You can see this synthesis perfected in their legendary paradise gardens. These were not just beautiful spaces, they were hydrological masterpieces. Water was choreographed, channeled through Qanat-like tunnels to emerge in fountains and rills, cooling the air and nourishing lush, symmetrical plantings. It was a complete system where engineering served philosophy, creating a miniature paradise on Earth that symbolized order, beauty, and the mastery of nature's bounty. This golden age was the essential bridge, a 1,000-year period where the practical genius of the ancients was not just saved from the dust, but refined and elevated, ready to be passed on to a waiting world. Even the mighty aqueduct of Valens, striding across the modern skyline of Istanbul, tells only part of the story. Constantinople was a city with 1,000 hidden mouths to feed, and its true resilience lay in a web of lesser-known channels and springs that have since vanished from both the land and the historical record. While the grand aqueducts are celebrated, the city's lifeblood also flowed through a secret network of secondary lines, local conduits, and natural springs, all meticulously managed and then utterly lost. Where did these vital arteries run through the urban fabric? How were they maintained as the empire slowly crumbled around them, and the knowledge of their precise paths began to fade? One of the most compelling theories points directly to the imperial palace itself. It seems almost unthinkable that the heart of Byzantine power would rely solely on the same public water sources as the rest of the city, sources that could be easily compromised during a siege or an uprising. Historians and archaeologists have long suspected the existence of dedicated, secret aqueducts, tunnels whose routes were deliberately obscured on maps and hidden from view, ensuring a private, secure flow of water directly to the emperor's court and its legendary gardens. Uncovering the complete hydraulic map of Constantinople is one of archaeology's great ongoing quests. It is a three-dimensional puzzle buried under centuries of urban growth, where every modern construction project risks cutting through a forgotten conduit of imperial history. The true extent of this hidden network may still lie beneath the streets, waiting for a chance discovery to reveal how a city, perpetually under threat, managed to keep its most precious resource flowing in silence. The true wealth of the Silk Road was not silk but water. Without the hidden pulse of the Qanat, the entire network of trade would have withered and died on the vine. Caravanserais, those great inns of the desert, were not built at random. Their locations were dictated by a single, life-giving secret: the presence of a Qanat outlet or a reliable well. These oases were not accidents of nature. They were hydrological achievements, carefully engineered way stations that turned barren stretches into corridors of civilization. Imagine the scene. A caravan of dusty, exhausted merchants and camels arrives at the gates as the sun sets. Inside the fortified walls, they find not just safety, but the sound of flowing water. A weary merchant from 1,000 miles away cups his hands under a fountain, drinking water that fell as rain on a distant mountain range a century ago, water that was patiently guided through the dark earth to this exact spot just for him. In that moment, the Qanat was more than a piece of engineering. It was a host, a silent facilitator of human connection. This reliable water supply did more than quench thirst. It enabled the exchange of everything. Silk and spices were the cargo, but the real conversation happened around the well. A Buddhist monk from India could debate theology with a Nestorian Christian from Persia. A Chinese scholar could sketch a new astrolabe for a mathematician from Baghdad. The genes of continents mingled in the children born along these routes. The Qanat and the Caravanserai formed an inseparable pair, the hidden hydraulic system and the vibrant social space it made possible. These underground channels were the silent partners in history's greatest intercultural exchange, proving that the most profound connections are often the ones we cannot see. This cooperation along the Silk Road hints at a deeper, unspoken pact. How did rival empires and competing merchants, people who might otherwise be enemies, agree on the rules for maintaining and sharing a Qanat? There were no international water treaties as we know them, no United Nations to enforce agreements. The code that governed these systems was largely unwritten, forged from a stark, mutual understanding. In the desert, water was not a commodity, it was a covenant. The survival of every traveler, every city, and every trade route depended on a simple, brutal truth. If you sabotage a water source, you are not harming an enemy, you are destroying a lifeline for everyone, including yourself. This created a powerful, self-enforcing peace. Local rulers, even those at war with a distant empire, had a vested interest in protecting the caravanserais and their water systems within their own borders. A functioning Qanat meant taxes from thriving trade, wealth from merchants spending money, and prestige as a hub of civilization. Destroying one would be an act of economic and social suicide. The maintenance of these tunnels required a different kind of law, one based on custom and community. The responsibility for cleaning the vertical shafts and clearing silt from the tunnels often fell to the villages that directly benefited from the water. This was not a choice, it was a duty, a non-negotiable part of life passed down through generations. Disputes over water distribution were likely settled by local elders or religious leaders, applying generations of precedent rather than a written legal code. The silence in the historical record about water wars along the Silk Road is in itself deafening evidence. It suggests a profound, shared pragmatism that transcended language and culture. They understood that some resources are too vital to be weaponized, that the flow of water must continue uninterrupted beneath the conflicts of the world above. While the grand aqueducts of Rome crumbled into picturesque ruins, their core intelligence did not vanish into the dust. It simply retreated, finding sanctuary behind the high, silent walls of monasteries. In the seeming chaos of the so-called Dark Ages, these isolated religious communities became unexpected fortresses of hydrological knowledge. Cut off from the decaying urban centers, a monastery's survival depended on its absolute self-sufficiency, and that meant mastering water. They did not merely dig wells, they engineered complete, closed-loop systems. Using channels and sluice gates, they diverted streams to provide fresh drinking water, built elaborate drainage networks for sanitation, and most importantly, harnessed the water's power to turn massive mill wheels. This was not just for grinding grain, it was a revolutionary source of mechanical energy that powered fulling mills for cloth, sawmills for timber, and trip hammers for forging iron. The monks were not just preserving Roman ideas, they were actively adapting them. They studied the broken specus, the enclosed conduits of the old aqueducts, and understood the principle of a consistent, gentle slope. Lacking the Roman Empire's vast resources, they improvised, crafting networks from hollowed-out logs, lead pipes, and carefully lined clay channels. A monastery's water system was its beating heart, a hidden engine of industry and cleanliness that sustained a micro-civilization. In this quiet, diligent work, the monks performed a miracle far greater than any single invention. They kept the flame of systematic engineering alive through centuries of turmoil, patiently preparing the world for the day when that knowledge would flow back out into the light. The silent guardians of the Qanat were not always local elders or merchants, they were sometimes warriors. The Knights Templar, an order of monk soldiers, established their headquarters on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, a place steeped in the hydraulic legacy of Romans, Byzantines, and earlier civilizations. During their long stay in the Holy Land, they would have been surrounded by the visible and invisible infrastructure of advanced water management, from the great aqueducts of Caesarea to the intricate Qanat systems that fed desert fortresses. Their own survival and the maintenance of their military might depended on securing a reliable water supply in an arid land. They were not just fighters, they were administrators of a vast international network, and they had a genius for logistics. When they returned to Europe, they did not come back empty-handed. At preceptories like their estate in Caudry in France, archaeological evidence reveals something extraordinary. A sophisticated system of canals, sluices, and mills that appears to leapfrog the technology of their European neighbors. The water management here was not merely functional, it was systematic and efficient, designed to power multiple industries and support a large, self-sufficient community. So, was this advanced engineering a skill they brought back from the East? The Templars were uniquely positioned to be conduits for this kind of practical knowledge. Their order was a transnational entity, a superpower with outposts stretching from Jerusalem to London. They witnessed firsthand how the Qanat and other eastern systems could turn barren land into productive assets, and they possessed the immense wealth and disciplined organization to replicate these concepts back home. Their famous secrecy fuels the mystery. While they are often associated with the hunt for religious relics, their true, world-changing treasure may have been far more mundane and far more transformative. It may have been the engineering schematics for water wheels, the principles of subterranean channel construction, or the mathematical calculations for maintaining a perfect hydraulic slope. This was knowledge that could directly increase agricultural output and industrial capacity, the real foundations of power. Of course, an alternative explanation exists. Perhaps the Templars' sophisticated waterworks were not a transferred technology, but simply the product of their unparalleled wealth and their monastic dedication to order and self-sufficiency. They could afford the best European engineers and command the labor to execute grand projects, applying existing knowledge on a scale no one else could match. The truth likely lies in a powerful fusion. The Templars' exposure to superior Eastern hydraulics sharpened their understanding of what was possible, and their unique resources and discipline allowed them to implement it. They may have been the perfect vessel, carrying not just gold, but the blueprints for a more resilient Europe, all hidden in plain sight within the quiet, efficient flow of water through their farms. Yet this silent, practical knowledge found its most breathtaking artistic expression far to the east. In the Indian subcontinent, the relationship with water was not hidden away in dark tunnels, but celebrated in spectacular, sunken palaces. Here, the challenge was not a constant, searing dryness, but a dramatic seasonal rhythm of drenching monsoons followed by long, punishing dry spells. The brilliant answer was the stepwell. These were not simple holes in the ground capped with a wall and a bucket. They were monumental feats of architecture inverted, built down into the earth. Imagine descending a grand staircase into the cool, quiet depths, passing story after story of intricately carved pavilions, pillared galleries, and sculpted niches. Every surface told a story from myth or daily life, transforming the functional act of collecting water into a spiritual and social pilgrimage. The stepwell's design was a masterpiece of hydrological intelligence. As the water table rose and fell with the seasons, the steps ensured there was always a path to reach it. In the scorching summer heat, the deepest levels remained a cool, communal sanctuary for the entire village, a place where women gathering water could also share news and find respite. But the subcontinent's genius extended beyond these breathtaking public monuments. In regions like Karnataka, engineers devised another kind of hidden web. They constructed complex networks of subterranean channels, often lined with stone, that captured and stored monsoon runoff, directing it silently beneath fields to irrigate crops with astonishing efficiency. This was a society that viewed water management as both a sacred duty and a communal art form. The stepwell was a temple to water, a place that honored its life-giving power through beauty and design, while the underground channels were its silent, working sermons, ensuring that every drop of the seasonal gift was cherished and put to use. This cosmic connection between earth and sky was carved directly into the stone of the stepwells themselves. At the magnificent Rani Kai Vav, every step down is a descent not just toward water, but into a meticulously planned universe. The entire structure is oriented on a precise east-west axis, a configuration that was clearly intentional. On the days of the equinoxes, when day and night are of equal length, the rising sun would have aligned perfectly with the central staircase, its light flooding the sculpted galleries and illuminating gods and goddesses carved into the walls. This was more than a beautiful spectacle, it was a profound statement. The builders were physically linking the water drawn from the deepest aquifers with the celestial order above. suggesting that the lifeblood of the earth and the cycles of the heavens were one and the same. But was this alignment purely spiritual, or did it have a practical, almost scientific function? One compelling theory suggests that these astronomical markers served as a giant stone calendar. The specific angle of sunlight entering the well on a solstice, or the appearance of a particular star in a carved window at a certain time of year, could have signaled the coming of the monsoon rains or the impending drop in the water table. It was a way of predicting the seasonal ebb and flow of the water itself, turning the entire structure into a predictive instrument. The true genius of the stepwell lies in this seamless fusion. You cannot separate its spiritual purpose from its practical one. The carvings of deities were not mere decoration. They were a reminder of the divine nature of water, while the celestial alignments provided the data needed to manage that sacred resource wisely. This presents a fascinating riddle for modern archaeologists. How many of these alignments were deliberate timekeeping devices, and how many were symbolic homage? The answer may be both, revealing a civilization that saw no distinction between the sacred and the scientific, viewing the management of water as a holy dialogue with the cosmos. Far to the east, in the deserts of Xinjiang, the Uyghur people achieved an identical miracle of engineering. Their Karez systems are a breathtaking sight from above, a line of craters marching across the barren landscape like a string of beads dropped on the sand. Each of these craters marks a vertical shaft leading down to a hidden world, a gently sloping tunnel that stretches for dozens of miles, tapping into the groundwater flowing from the mighty Tianshan Mountains. The sheer scale of this hand-dug network is almost impossible to comprehend, a testament to generations of laborers who moved mountains of earth to bring life to the surface. This precise duplication of the Persian Qanat, thousands of miles away, presents one of the greatest puzzles in the history of technology. Was this a case of incredible coincidence, or is it proof of that silent conversation along the Silk Road? The timing is certainly suggestive. The Karez systems reached their peak sophistication during the Han Dynasty, a period of intense trade and cultural exchange along those very routes. It is easy to envision a traveling engineer from Persia sharing the core concept with a local well digger in the Turpan Basin, a spark of knowledge that found perfect conditions to flourish. Yet, the argument for independent invention is equally powerful. The problem faced by the Uyghur people was identical to that of the ancient Persians, a desperate need to harvest distant mountain water in an arid land. The solution, governed by the unchangeable laws of gravity and hydrology, is one of elegant simplicity. A gently sloping tunnel is the only logical way to move water over long distances without pumps. The vertical shafts are the only practical method for digging, maintaining, and ventilating such a tunnel. It is a solution that feels almost inevitable once the problem is fully understood. The technical perfection of the Karez speaks to a deep, local mastery of the environment. The builders possessed an intimate knowledge of the geology and the hidden aquifers, a knowledge earned through centuries of observation and experimentation in their own specific landscape. This was not a borrowed blueprint, but a homegrown masterpiece born from the same universal language of human necessity. So, are we looking at a transferred technology, or a parallel awakening of the same brilliant idea? The truth may be that the Karez is both, a symbol of our shared human genius and the invisible threads that connected even the most remote corners of the ancient world. The logistical puzzle of building a Qanat is almost harder to grasp than the engineering itself. How do you coordinate a team of diggers to carve a perfectly sloped tunnel for miles through total darkness, ensuring it emerges at an exact spot, a precise height above a distant village? They began not with a tunnel but with a line of holes, Teams of surveyors would first stake out the entire proposed path from the water source to the destination. Then, at regular intervals, sometimes as close as every 20 paces, they would begin digging the vertical shafts. These were not random pits, they were the spine of the entire operation, the access points for every single step that followed. The diggers would descend deep into each shaft, carving out the horizontal tunnel in both directions, toward the previous shaft and the next one, working in a coordinated, expanding web of darkness. They were essentially building the tunnel from dozens of separate points simultaneously, a breathtaking feat of organization that required every team to be perfectly synchronized. Their tools for achieving the critical slope were deceptively simple, yet utterly ingenious. A plumb bob, a simple weight on a string, ensured their vertical shafts were truly straight down. To control the all-important gradient of the tunnel itself, they used the most reliable level known to humanity, water itself. They would dig a long, shallow trench along the proposed route and fill it with water. The surface of that water would always find a perfectly level plane. By measuring the depth of the water at each end of the trench, they could calculate the gentle, consistent drop needed over that distance. This could be translated into a precise measurement for the tunnel diggers below, a target they had to hit with nothing but picks, shovels, and an unwavering sense of direction. The true miracle, however, was not mathematical but social. This was not a project ordered by a distant king. It was an undertaking that bound an entire community together for generations. The knowledge of the correct slope, the specific path through the geology, and the maintenance schedule was a sacred trust passed from master to apprentice. Every family likely had a role, from the diggers and basket haulers to those who provided food and water for the teams. It was a shared investment in survival, a collective act of faith that the water would indeed flow at the end of their monumental labor. We can understand the tools, but the human coordination, the silent agreement to spend a lifetime on a project whose full benefit only your children or grandchildren would see, that is the part that truly defies our modern imagination. A reliable water source did more than prevent thirst. It created the very possibility of complex society. When a community no longer needed every single member to be dedicated to the simple, brutal task of finding water, everything changed. People were freed to become anything else: artisans crafting pottery, merchants organizing trade, soldiers training for defense, or scribes recording laws. This specialization of labor is the foundation of civilization itself, and it was all built on the back of that steady, unseen flow. Cities like Samarkand and Palmyra did not just appear in the desert, they were conjured into being. They became cosmopolitan crossroads precisely because their hidden water networks could support not just a village, but a teeming, diverse metropolis of traders, scholars, and travelers from 1,000 different cultures. The aqueduct was the city's true founding document, written not on parchment but in stone and earth. This necessity forged a unique kind of peace. The construction and maintenance of a Qanat or an aqueduct was a project so vast it transcended tribal loyalties and personal rivalries. To dig a tunnel that stretched for miles, everyone involved, from the landowner to the lowliest laborer, had to agree on a shared set of rules. They had to cooperate on a scale that was previously unimaginable, deciding how to distribute the water, how to schedule the cleaning of the tunnels, and how to settle disputes. This was a form of social contract, an unwritten constitution governing the most vital resource. The result was a pre-modern globalization. The same underground channel that watered a farmer's field in Persia also enabled a Chinese silk merchant to rest his camels at a Caravanserai, which in turn allowed a Greek philosopher to debate in a library in Alexandria. The flow of water facilitated the flow of everything else: goods, genes, languages, and beliefs, weaving a tapestry of connection across 3 continents. We often think of the ancient world as a collection of isolated empires, but beneath the surface, they were already deeply, inextricably linked by a network of tunnels that carried not just water, but the future of humanity itself. These cross-border water channels created a silent, fluid frontier. What happened when a Qanat began deep within the territory of one king, yet its life-giving flow was destined for a city in another? There were no maps with clear lines, only a shared understanding that a tunnel, once dug, respected no border. The survival of entire populations in the downstream kingdom depended on the goodwill and discipline of their upstream neighbors. This necessitated the world's first water treaties, fragile agreements etched not only on clay tablets but in the daily practices of communities. While few formal documents have survived the centuries, their existence is undeniable. We see echoes of this ancient diplomacy in a remarkable later example, a treaty between the powerful city of Mari on the Euphrates and a neighboring tribe. The agreement stipulated that if the tribe's canals were damaged in a conflict, the soldiers of Mari were obligated to help them with the repairs. This was not mere charity. It was a stark recognition that a broken water system upstream would eventually cripple everyone downstream. The true law, however, was often unwritten. It was a code enforced by geography itself. A downstream kingdom held a powerful, non-violent weapon: the threat of redirecting trade routes. If an upstream ruler foolishly cut off the water, the caravans would simply stop coming to his territory as well, devastating his economy. This created a balance of power, a form of mutually assured hydration that kept the water flowing even during periods of political tension. Maintenance was a ritual of peace. The annual cleaning of a shared Qanat likely required workers from both sides of the border to descend into the same dark tunnels, passing baskets of silt hand over hand. In that shared, cramped darkness, political rivalries faded against the immediate, physical task of ensuring survival. They were not enemies down there, they were partners in a common, earthly struggle. This hidden diplomacy of water suggests that our ancient ancestors understood interconnectivity on a level we often forget. Long before modern international law, they had already mastered a profound truth: that some resources create bonds that are far stronger than borders. The harshness of the environment itself was the great architect of these hidden networks. In the sun-scorched landscapes of Persia, the arid plateaus of North Africa, and the rain-shadowed valleys of Peru, one universal truth dictated every aspect of life: water was the ultimate currency. The very existence of civilization was a constant, precarious negotiation with a dry climate. Surface rivers could be fickle, seasonal rains could fail, and open reservoirs would vanish into the thirsty air under a relentless sun. This immense environmental pressure forged an engineering solution that was as much about conservation as it was about conveyance. By sinking their water channels deep into the earth, these ancient builders created a system that was perfectly adapted to its surroundings. The surrounding soil and rock acted as a natural insulator, protecting the precious flow from the evaporative heat that would have claimed it in an open canal. This single innovation alone meant the difference between a trickle reaching a village and a steady, reliable stream, but the advantages went even deeper. An underground channel was a closed system, shielded from the wind-blown sand and debris that could contaminate an open water source. It was protected from the dust of passing caravans and the waste of wild animals, delivering a cleaner, safer supply of water directly to the community. This subterranean design also offered a crucial element of security. In a world of shifting tribal alliances and conflicts, a visible aqueduct or a surface well was a vulnerable target, easily poisoned or destroyed by a rival force. A Qanat, however, was a hidden artery. Its outlet might be known, but its source and the miles of tunnel leading to it were buried secrets, incredibly difficult for an enemy to locate and disrupt. This was not merely a clever piece of engineering, it was a profound declaration of resilience. These networks represent humanity's long struggle against a challenging planet, and our enduring triumph in finding a way not just to survive but to flourish. They are a testament to the power of adaptation, showing how a brilliant idea, born from sheer necessity, could turn a limiting environment into a cradle for empires. Yet for all their resilience, these networks did not flow forever. One by one, the great Qanats and aqueducts fell silent. The question of why such sophisticated systems were abandoned is a haunting one, pointing to vulnerabilities we still face today. In some regions, the cause was a slow, creeping disaster, a change in the climate itself. A prolonged drought stretching for decades could cause the water table to drop so far that the mother well, the deep underground source of the entire Qanat, simply ran dry. The tunnel, carved at such immense effort, now reached only into dust. No amount of maintenance could summon water that was no longer there. In other cases, the collapse was violently sudden. The Mongol invasions of the 13th century were not just a military conquest, they were a systemic shock that shattered the delicate social order. The knowledge of how to maintain the tunnels, the community agreements for cleaning them, the generations of master diggers, all were scattered or destroyed. A Qanat could be fatally damaged in a single season of neglect, its channels clogged with silt, its carefully calculated slope lost forever. The rediscovery of these systems centuries later was a profound shock to modern archaeologists. Exploring a desert believed to be barren, they would find a line of craters and, upon investigation, uncover a perfectly engineered water tunnel stretching to the horizon. It was a humbling revelation of a lost golden age, a sophistication that had been entirely erased from memory. This raises a chilling question about our own civilization. We build vast and complex infrastructures, assuming they are permanent. But the silent fate of the Qanats reminds us that the most advanced systems are only as resilient as the social and environmental stability that supports them. When that foundation crumbles, even the water that once united continents can vanish back into the earth. That perfect, gentle slope was the silent, beating heart of the entire system. It was a line drawn between life and ruin. Get the angle wrong, and the entire monumental effort would fail. If the slope was even slightly too steep, the water would gain dangerous speed, scouring the tunnel walls, carving away the very structure that contained it until the channel collapsed into a muddy ruin. Yet if the slope was too shallow, the water's momentum would die. It would slow to a standstill, allowing silt and sediment to settle, gradually choking the tunnel until it became a stagnant, useless tomb. The margin for error over miles of darkness was astonishingly small. How did they thread this needle with such consistent perfection? Their tools were masterpieces of elegant simplicity. One of the most common was a long, water-filled trough. By carefully observing the surface of the water over a measured distance, they could confirm it was perfectly level. Once they knew the two ends of the trough were at an equal height, any difference in the ground level between those 2 points revealed the exact slope of the land. This was the application of a fundamental law of physics, that water always seeks its own level. They were using the behavior of water itself to measure the very path it would take. This principle, repeated over and over again across vast, undulating landscapes, allowed them to plot a course with a drop of perhaps only a few inches every 100 feet. The true genius was in the scaling. They would break the entire route into manageable segments, using their water level to map each one, slowly building up a perfectly graded line from the mountain aquifer all the way to the distant village. It was a symphony of precision conducted with a bucket of water and a wooden trough, proving that the deepest understanding of nature does not require complex machinery, but only patient, brilliant observation. The silent, dark world of the Qanat tunnel held a hidden danger beyond collapsing walls or flooding water. It was the air itself. A digger working miles from the nearest opening would be consuming a finite supply of oxygen, slowly replacing it with his own exhaled breath and the dust from his labor. Without a constant refresh of air, the tunnel would become a death trap. The vertical shafts were the obvious solution for hauling out earth and lowering workers, but their design hints at a second, more sophisticated function. The regular spacing of these shafts, often appearing like clockwork every 20 or 30 paces, was not merely for logistical convenience. This precise interval may have been the key to a passive, self-regulating ventilation system. The principle is one we still see in nature, the simple science of convection. Warm, stale air from the depths of the tunnel, made heavy with moisture and human breath, would naturally rise. It would find its escape through the vertical shafts, drifting upward into the cooler, drier desert atmosphere. Simultaneously, fresh, dense air would be drawn down through other shafts, creating a continuous, gentle circulation throughout the entire underground network. This was a breathing apparatus built from holes in the ground. The question that captivates engineers today is whether this was a happy accident of the design or a calculated feature. Did these ancient hydrologists possess an intuitive understanding of fluid dynamics that extended from water to air? They were masters of guiding one invisible flow, so it is not a great leap to think they could manage another. The diameter of each shaft would have been critical, a larger opening allowing for a greater volume of air exchange. Perhaps through generations of trial and error, they discovered the perfect formula of spacing and size that kept the tunnels habitable. This subtle aspect of their genius speaks to a holistic wisdom, where every single component of the system was designed to serve multiple, intertwined purposes. They were not just digging for water, they were crafting an entire subterranean environment, one that supported both the life-giving flow and the lives of the people who maintained it. This sacred dimension transformed the simple act of water management into a form of worship. In the ancient Zoroastrian faith, water, known as a ban, was revered as one of the 7 supreme creations of their god, Ahura Mazda. To pollute a stream or waste a well's bounty was not merely careless, it was a profound sin against the divine order. This deep spiritual reverence was seamlessly carried forward into Islam, where water is celebrated as the ultimate gift from God, the very substance from which all life was created. The charitable distribution of water, known as Sadaqa al-Ma, was considered one of the most virtuous acts a person could perform. This wasn't just a theological idea, it was a powerful social engine. The religious imperative to provide water fueled a civic duty that crossed class lines. A wealthy merchant would gain honor and spiritual merit by funding the construction of a new public fountain, while a humble farmer found piety in spending his Saturday cleaning silt from the local Qanat. The entire community, from top to bottom, was united in this sacred obligation. You can see this fusion of faith and function in the heart of every traditional Islamic city. The public fountain, or sabil, was never just a place to drink. Its elegantly carved stonework and soothing sound were an offering of beauty and tranquility, a quiet corner for reflection. The public bath, or hammam, was more than a place to get clean. It was a sanctuary for ritual purification before prayer, a hub of social interaction, and a tangible expression of communal well-being. An aqueduct, therefore, was far more than a utility pipe made of stone. It was a physical manifestation of divine blessing, a direct channel of God's grace flowing into the city. The technology itself was woven into the fabric of spiritual belief, proving that the most enduring systems are those that serve not just the body but the human soul. That choice between hiding water underground and lifting it into the sky on towering arches speaks to a fundamental philosophical divide. For the Persian engineer, the Qanat was an act of harmony with the landscape. Its genius lay in its invisibility, a quiet collaboration with the natural forces of gravity and geology. It was a technology that sought to work within the Earth system, not to dominate it. The water arrived as if by magic, a gift from the ground itself, requiring no grand spectacle. This reflected a worldview where humanity was a steward of fragile resources, where the ultimate intelligence was in creating a system so seamless it appeared to be part of the natural order. The Roman aqueduct, striding across the countryside on its majestic arcades, communicated an entirely different message. This was power made visible, a declaration that human will could reshape the world to its own demands. The aqueduct did not hide from the landscape, it conquered it. Those arches were a constant, looming reminder of the state's ability to command nature, to bring life to a city through sheer force of engineering and organization. It was a billboard written in stone, proclaiming that Rome could provide what no other civilization could. Yet this was not merely an artistic preference, it was also a practical response to geography and threat. The Persian highlands were often fractured and mountainous, terrain where tunneling was more efficient than attempting to build a level, elevated channel across deep ravines. Furthermore, in a region of shifting tribal powers and frequent conflict, a hidden water source was a secure one. An enemy could easily destroy a visible aqueduct, but finding and sabotaging a Qanat's mother well was a far more difficult task. The Romans, secure within their empire's stable borders for centuries, faced fewer threats to their internal infrastructure and could afford to build for permanence and propaganda. So, were they showing off? In a sense, yes, but it was a calculated show of strength meant to inspire awe and loyalty in citizens and fear in potential enemies. The architecture of water becomes a silent language, telling us whether a civilization saw itself as a partner with nature or as its master. This intricate web of stone and water demanded a covenant from the community that relied upon it. A Qanat was not a static monument, but a living, breathing entity that required constant care, a responsibility that fell not to a distant government, but to the hands of every villager it sustained. The annual cleaning of the tunnels was a ritual as vital as any harvest. Teams of men would descend into the dark, narrow passages, passing baskets of silt and debris back along a human chain, from the deepest shadows up to the blinding desert light. It was back-breaking, claustrophobic work, a shared sacrifice that ensured the water would flow for another year. The distribution of that water was a matter of exquisite fairness, managed by a respected figure often called the water master. This individual, possessing a deep, almost sacred knowledge of the system, would allocate time slots for each family's field, measured by the steady flow of a water clock or the shadow cast by a specific stone. A farmer's share was not a matter of wealth or status, but of a right earned through his family's contribution to the maintenance of the tunnel itself. This created a powerful social bond, a shared identity forged in the cool, dark depths of their common lifeline. The entire community, from the wealthiest landowner to the poorest laborer, was bound by a simple, unbreakable rule: the health of the Qanat was the health of the people. Disputes were settled not by distant magistrates, but by councils of elders applying customs passed down through generations. This intricate social contract, written in water and labor, turned a simple engineering marvel into the very heart of the community, proving that the most resilient structures are those built not just of stone but of trust. The Muqannis were the hidden aristocracy of the ancient world, masters of a dark and dangerous craft. These were the Qanat diggers, a class of workers whose specialized knowledge was so vital, it may have been guarded like a state secret. Theirs was a generational inheritance, a set of skills passed from father to son in a silent, subterranean apprenticeship. The work itself was a form of slow-motion heroism. A single misjudgment in the tunnel slope could doom a decade of labor. A sudden collapse could bury a team in an instant, their names lost to the earth that sustained everyone else. This immense risk and irreplaceable skill would have given the Muqannis a powerful form of social leverage. Could they have unionized? Did they form secret guilds to control their wages and protect the mysteries of their trade? It is a tantalizing possibility. In a world where water was power, the men who could summon it from the stone held a quiet, profound authority. A city or a king could not afford to offend them. Their negotiations would not have been recorded in royal decrees, but whispered in the shadows of a caravanserai or beside the mouth of a well. The true history of these workers is a ghost in the historical record, preserved only in the oral traditions of their descendants. We are left to piece together the hidden hierarchies of the ancient world from the silent, enduring evidence of their work, the miles of perfect tunnel that still flow beneath our feet, a monument to a brotherhood we can no longer see. The echoes of this ancient ingenuity are not locked away in dusty history books. They flow, quite literally, into our modern world. In the arid landscapes of Iran and Oman, you can still find communities whose daily lives are sustained by the very same qanats dug by their ancestors centuries, even millennia ago. These are not museum pieces kept for show. They are vibrant, functioning arteries, delivering cool, fresh water just as they did when the Silk Road caravans passed by. Their continued operation is the most powerful testament imaginable to their sustainable design, a system so perfectly balanced with its environment that it has outlasted empires. This ancient wisdom is now finding new life in our most cutting-edge green infrastructure projects. Modern engineers grappling with water scarcity are looking back to these old masters, reviving the principles of managed aquifer recharge. Instead of letting precious stormwater rush into the sea, they are creating spreading grounds to let it percolate down and refill underground reserves, mimicking the Qanat's genius for using the earth itself as a massive natural storage tank. Even our legal frameworks for water bear the imprint of this ancient past. The complex system of water rights, where the timing and volume of a farmer's irrigation are carefully allocated, is a direct descendant of the watermaster's role and the communal agreements that governed every qanat. It is a profound reminder that our most advanced solutions are not always about imposing our will with concrete and steel, but about learning to work within the elegant, enduring systems nature has already provided. The silent, flowing intelligence of the past is still speaking if we are willing to listen. The same technology that maps our modern world is now illuminating the ghost of the ancient one. From hundreds of miles in space, satellites equipped with advanced sensors are scanning the Earth, not for living cities, but for the spectral impressions of dead ones. They are not looking for structures, but for absences, for the subtle ways a buried tunnel announces its presence to the sky. A long-filled vertical shaft, for instance, alters the soil density above it. This change affects how vegetation grows, creating a faint line of slightly different greenery, or a subtle depression invisible from the ground but starkly clear from orbit. These are the fingerprints of a qanat, a signature written in dirt and root, waiting centuries for someone to learn how to read it. On the ground, this celestial detective work is confirmed by ground-penetrating radar, which sends pulses of energy into the earth and listens for the echoes. A solid layer of bedrock returns one signal, while the hollow void of a collapsed tunnel or the loose fill of an ancient channel returns another. It is like giving the landscape an X-ray, revealing the skeletal remains of a hidden circulatory system. Each new discovery is a quiet revolution. A cluster of ruins in the Sahara, once thought to be isolated outposts, is now shown to be linked by a web of fagaras, proving they were part of a coordinated, thriving community. A lone fortress in the Jordanian desert is suddenly understood to have been sustained by a previously unknown aqueduct, its source a mystery no longer. Every time a new line is drawn on the archaeological map, it forces us to redraw the borders of ancient influence and trade. We are realizing that the empty spaces on our historical maps were not empty at all. They were simply hiding their connections underground. The greatest mystery today is no longer just how they built this network, but how much of it we have yet to find. How many more of these watery threads are still buried, silently holding the secrets of a world far more united than we ever dreamed. So we arrive at a fundamental choice, an engineering decision that reveals the soul of a civilization. Do you force the land to obey you, or do you learn to work within its silent rules? The Roman aqueduct answered with arches of stone that strode across valleys in a permanent declaration of power. It was a conquest of nature, a massive, elevated statement meant to be seen for miles, reminding every citizen and subject of the empire's overwhelming reach. Its water roared in the open air, a magnificent display of abundance that came at a cost, surrendering much of its volume to the evaporative sun. The Persian Qanat chose the opposite path, the way of stealth and harmony. It was a hidden world, a gently sloping tunnel that conserved every precious drop by moving it in the cool, dark embrace of the earth, safe from the desert's thirst. It did not dominate the landscape, it whispered to it, blending so perfectly into the environment that its presence was often a secret known only to those it sustained. This comparison is not about crowning one system superior, but about understanding two brilliant, divergent answers to the same universal challenge. One civilization expressed its genius through overwhelming, visible force, the other through quiet, sustainable integration. Both created thriving cities and enabled vast empires, proving that technological and societal advancement is not a single road, but a landscape of many possible paths, each shaped by a culture's deepest relationship with the world around it. That faint, ghostly trail of an idea is exactly what we are chasing. The physical aqueducts themselves are rooted in their local stone, but the blueprint for moving water, the core intelligence, was astonishingly fluid. Think of it not as a single, documented migration, but as a slow, creeping osmosis of genius. A Persian engineer's solution to a mountain aquifer is observed by a Roman legionary stationed in the east. He carries the story of these mountain tunnels back to his centurion, who mentions it to a civil engineer planning a new water source for a North African colony. In that colony, the Roman engineer, facing a desert landscape eerily similar to Persia, fuses the local Garamantes knowledge of fossil water with the Persian concept of a gravity-fed tunnel. He does not build a Persian Qanat nor a Roman aqueduct in the classic sense, but something new, a hybrid adapted to the Saharan reality. This is how the intellectual chain would have worked, not through formal education, but through the lived experience of empire and trade. The evidence is not in a single signed document that says Qanat blueprint transferred to Rome. It is in the subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in engineering approach. Why did Roman water systems in arid provinces like Syria or North Africa rely more heavily on long, subterranean conduits, much more so than the celebrated elevated arcades of Italy? It is because the local environment demanded it, and local populations already possessed that ancient knowledge. the Romans were brilliant adapters, not just innovators. They saw what worked and they scaled it, often stamping it with their own unique mark of imperial power. So the chain is there, but it is forged from 1,000 unrecorded conversations between a Roman surveyor and a native well digger, between a merchant's tale and an engineer's practical need. This conceptual river flowed silently beneath the more visible history of conquest and commerce, linking 3 continents with a single, life-giving thought. Yet this vast, silent network was not defeated by a single cataclysm. Its decline was a slow unraveling, a complex tapestry of causes where the delicate balance between technology, society, and the environment finally frayed beyond repair. The first threat often came from the Earth itself. Geological shifts, a subtle tremor or a slow settling of the land, could misalign a tunnel's perfect slope or collapse a crucial section. A single blockage, if left unrepaired, could back up the entire system, turning a flowing channel into a stagnant, silt-filled tomb. But the physical damage was only part of the story. The true fragility of the Qanat lay in its social contract. These systems required a stable, cooperative community where every family understood their role in the annual cleaning ritual. When empires fractured, when wars and political instability swept across regions, that shared sense of purpose shattered. The knowledge held by the Muqannis, the master diggers, was scattered. The communal will to spend weeks in the dark, cramped tunnels simply evaporated. Without that meticulous, generation-spanning upkeep, the Qanats were living on borrowed time. The final blow, however, arrived with the whir of an electric motor. The 20th century introduced cheaper, modern pump technology, a seductively simple solution that promised instant water on demand. Why spend years digging a tunnel or weeks maintaining it, when a drilled well and a powerful pump could pull water directly from the aquifer in hours? This new approach was brutally efficient, but it lacked the ancient wisdom of sustainability. The pumps could drain an aquifer in a generation, a feat a gently flowing Qanat could never accomplish. It was a slow death by 1,000 cuts, a quiet abandonment of a system that had once united continents, not because it failed, but because the world around it changed too fast. The networks did not break, they were simply forgotten, their silent water gradually surrendering to the dust. Their success in finding water seems almost supernatural to us now. How did ancient engineers, without a single drill sample or geological survey, pinpoint the exact location to dig the mother well? This first, deep shaft was the heart of the entire system, a gamble that could waste years of labor if it failed to find a strong aquifer. The answer lies in a lost science of observation, a deep literacy in the language of the land. They were not guessing, they were reading a map written in the earth itself. They learned to recognize specific plants that were thirstier than others, whose long roots were a sure sign they were tapping into a deep, hidden water table. They studied the lay of the land, understanding that water often flowed beneath the surface along the same paths it would take on the surface, collecting in subterranean basins beneath the feet of certain hills or at the confluence of invisible underground valleys. The practice of using a forked stick, what we now call dowsing, is often ridiculed. Yet for these masters, it may have been less about magic and more about a focused state of awareness, a way of quieting the mind to perceive the most subtle clues, from the dampness of the soil to the faint scent of moisture on a particular breeze. Their entire methodology was a form of empirical science built over generations. A master well digger would have memorized the successes and failures of his ancestors, creating a mental database of which slopes, which rock layers, and which plant communities had reliably led to water in the past. This was a cumulative, practical knowledge passed down through an unbroken chain of apprenticeship. We may dismiss their methods as primitive, but their consistent, breathtaking success in some of the world's most arid places forces a humbling question. Have we, in our reliance on technology, lost a deeper, more intuitive understanding of the planet? Their genius was not in instruments, but in an unparalleled connection to the world they sought to harness. From the Persian plains to the Roman hills and the Chinese deserts, this hidden web of water tunnels stands as a timeless testament to a shared human genius. It was a project that united three continents not through the force of conquest, but through the quiet, universal need for life-sustaining water. These channels carried something far more precious than a resource. They were the very arteries through which civilization itself pulsed, delivering the seeds of culture, technology, and cooperation to the most remote corners of the ancient world. In their silent, dark flow, we find a profound truth that our deepest connections have always run beneath the surface of our apparent divisions. Today, as we confront our own escalating global water crises, the lessons from this ancient network ring out with stunning clarity. Their model of sustainable design, using gravity and the Earth itself as a natural filter and cooler, is a masterclass in working with nature rather than against it. Their intricate social contracts, where entire communities were bound by the shared duty of maintenance and fair distribution, offer a blueprint for collective action. And their sheer ingenuity, achieving miracles of precision with simple tools and profound observation, reminds us that the most advanced solutions are often the most elegant. This journey through the hidden arteries of history invites us to look beneath the surface, not only of the land but of our own modern assumptions. What forgotten wisdom might we rediscover to guide us forward? Please share your own thoughts on these incredible water mysteries in the comments below.